Your doctor told you to watch your sugar, cut the carbs, take your medication, walk more, and you did all of it. You are doing all of it right now. So why is your cholesterol still climbing? Why are your triglycerides still high? Why do your feet tingle at night? Why does your cardiologist keep talking about stronger medications? Because the conversation almost never includes the one dietary change that has the most direct and documented impact on the cardiovascular and neurological complications of diabetes. Not a supplement, not a medication. A specific group of fish, eaten 2 to 3 times per week, that can drop triglycerides by 30%, reduce the inflammation driving your insulin resistance, and slow the nerve damage that causes the tingling in your feet, all through mechanisms that no other food produces. The problem is not that you are not trying hard enough. The problem is that nobody told you which fish to eat, why each one works at the biological level, and how to prepare them so the active compounds actually reach your tissues and do their job. Today, I am going to fix that. I am counting down the 6 best fish for people managing diabetes, ranked by their specific benefits for cardiovascular protection, insulin sensitivity, and neuropathy prevention. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor. Write your country in the comments. And before we start, I want to say something directly. This is the kind of information your doctor should be telling you at every appointment, but doesn't. Subscribe so I can keep telling you. Let me tell you about Fernando. He was 67 and had been managing type 2 diabetes for 12 years. He was taking metformin consistently. He had eliminated sugar from his diet and walked regularly. By most measures, he was a compliant, engaged patient, doing everything he had been advised to do. But his cardiovascular markers kept deteriorating. His triglycerides were at 280. His LDL cholesterol was elevated despite his dietary effort. His inflammatory markers were high. And for the past several months, he had been waking at night with persistent tingling in his feet, the unmistakable early signature of diabetic neuropathy progressing. His physician was preparing to increase his statin dose. When I reviewed Fernando's protein sources in detail, the pattern was immediately apparent. He ate chicken primarily, occasionally red meat, fish rarely, because as he told me, he did not know which fish to choose or how to prepare it correctly. I gave him a specific list of 6 fish and asked him to eat fish at least 3 times per week for 6 weeks, prepared in the specific ways I am about to share with you. 6 weeks later, his triglycerides had dropped from 280 to 195. His LDL had fallen 18 points. His foot tingling had reduced enough that he was sleeping through the night for the first time in months. 3 months later, his inflammatory markers had improved significantly. His physician decided against increasing his statin dose. I only changed the type of protein I was eating 3 times per week, Fernando told me at his follow-up. That was it, and my body responded in ways it never had before. Today, I am going to show you exactly which fish produced those results and why. Why fish is different from every other protein for diabetics. Before we count down the 6 fish, you need to understand what makes the right fish categorically different from other protein sources for people managing diabetes. Because the difference is not simply that fish is lean or low in calories. The mechanism is more specific than that and more relevant to diabetes specifically. The defining compounds in the most beneficial fish for diabetes are EPA and DHA, the 2 primary omega-3 long-chain fatty acids found in cold water fatty fish. These compounds do 3 things simultaneously that are each independently significant for diabetes management. The first is systemic inflammation reduction. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the primary drivers of insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes. Inflammatory cytokines interfere directly with insulin receptor signaling, making the cells of muscle and fat tissue less responsive to insulin even when it is present in adequate quantities. EPA and DHA suppress the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, reducing the inflammatory burden that is continuously worsening insulin resistance. Less inflammation means better insulin function. Better insulin function means better glucose control. The second is triglyceride reduction. Elevated triglycerides are one of the most common and most dangerous cardiovascular complications in people with type 2 diabetes. EPA and DHA reduce hepatic triglyceride synthesis and increase the clearance of triglycerides from the bloodstream through mechanisms that are well established and measurable. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of the American Heart Association found that omega-3 supplementation reduced triglycerides by an average of 15 to 30%. 2 to 3 servings of the right fish per week provides comparable EPA and DHA levels to the doses used in that research. The third is neuroprotection. Diabetic peripheral neuropathy, the progressive nerve damage that causes the tingling, numbness, and pain that Fernando experienced in his feet, develops because elevated blood glucose damages the myelin sheaths that insulate peripheral nerves. DHA is a structural component of nerve cell membranes. Adequate dietary DHA supports the integrity of these membranes and has been shown to slow the progression of early neuropathic changes. For people who have noticed early tingling or numbness in extremities, this mechanism is directly relevant. These three mechanisms are why the right fish, eaten at the right frequency, produces results that other protein sources cannot replicate. Fish number 6. Trout opens the countdown as the most accessible and versatile of the 6 fish, with a nutritional profile that makes it an excellent foundation for a diabetes protective diet, even without the extreme omega-3 concentrations of the fatty fish higher on this list. A 100-gram serving of trout provides approximately 20 grams of high-quality complete protein. For people managing diabetes, adequate protein intake at each meal is important for 2 specific reasons. Protein has essentially no direct glycemic impact, meaning it does not raise blood glucose, and protein slows gastric emptying, which means the carbohydrates eaten alongside a protein-containing meal are absorbed more gradually, producing a smaller post-meal glucose spike. A protein-centered meal built around trout produces a more stable 2-hour post-meal glucose reading than the same meal built around a lower protein alternative. Trout also provides meaningful quantities of vitamin B12, selenium, and omega-3 fatty acids, though at lower concentrations than the fatty fish higher in this countdown. The selenium content is particularly relevant for diabetes. Selenium supports the function of glutathione peroxidase, one of the body's primary antioxidant enzymes, and adequate selenium status has been associated with better glycemic regulation in several observational studies. The preparation method that preserves trout's nutritional profile most effectively is baking or grilling with olive oil, lemon, and fresh herbs. The combination of trout protein with olive oil's monounsaturated fats creates a meal that is anti-inflammatory, glycemically stable, and deeply satisfying. Served with steamed, non-starchy vegetables, a trout-based meal produces minimal post-meal glucose elevation and sustained satiety for 4 to 5 hours. Margaret was 71 and had been avoiding fish entirely because she found the taste of stronger, oily fish overpowering. When I suggested trout as a mild, accessible starting point, she integrated it into her diet twice per week. Within 6 weeks, she reported noticeably better post-dinner glucose readings. "I expected fish to taste much stronger than this," she said. "Trout is something I genuinely look forward to eating." The best fish for diabetes is ultimately the one you will eat consistently. Trout makes consistency easy. Fish number 5. Herring. Herring is one of the most nutritionally dense fish available for diabetes management, and one of the most consistently undervalued in most Western dietary patterns, despite being one of the most affordable options on this list. A 100-gram serving of herring provides 19 grams of protein, approximately 2 grams of EPA and DHA combined, and micronutrient levels that are exceptional across multiple dimensions relevant to diabetes. It contains 90% of daily vitamin D requirements, 200% of daily vitamin B12 requirements, and 80% of daily selenium requirements in a single serving. Each of these micronutrients deserves specific attention in the context of diabetes. Vitamin D deficiency is highly prevalent in people with type 2 diabetes, and research has consistently linked low vitamin D status with worsened insulin resistance and poorer glycemic control. The mechanism involves vitamin D receptors on pancreatic beta cells that influence insulin secretion and peripheral insulin sensitivity. Herring's exceptional vitamin D content makes it one of the most efficient dietary sources of this nutrient available. Vitamin B12 deficiency is specifically relevant to people taking metformin, which is one of the most widely prescribed diabetes medications. Metformin reduces B12 absorption in the small intestine, and long-term metformin use is associated with significant B12 depletion that can worsen neuropathy symptoms independently of glucose control. Herring's B12 content directly addresses this depletion. The preparation consideration for herring is sodium management. Pickled, smoked, and heavily cured herring varieties contain sodium levels that are problematic for people managing blood pressure alongside diabetes. Fresh herring grilled with lemon and garlic, or lightly smoked herring from verified low-sodium sources preserves the nutritional profile without the sodium burden. Herring added to a warm vegetable soup at the end of cooking, preserving its omega-3 content by avoiding high-temperature exposure, creates a deeply nourishing and affordable meal. Edward was 73 and had been eating the same rotation of chicken, eggs, and occasional red meat for years without variation. His triglycerides were consistently elevated, and his B12 levels had been declining since starting metformin 4 years earlier. When I introduced herring as a dietary option and explained its B12 content specifically in the context of metformin-induced depletion, the connection resonated immediately. He had never associated his increasing fatigue and the worsening sensation in his feet with a nutrient his medication was depleting. He added herring twice per week. At his 3-month laboratory review, his B12 had risen significantly, and his neuropathy symptoms had stabilized for the first time in 2 years. "Nobody told me my medication was depleting something I could get from a fish," he said. "That is exactly the kind of information I should have had years ago." Fish number 4, mackerel. Mackerel appears at number 4 with the highest omega-3 concentration of any fish on this list in terms of grams per 100-gram serving. A single serving of Pacific or Atlantic mackerel provides 3.2 grams of EPA and DHA combined. This is a quantity that exceeds the American Heart Association's recommended daily intake for people with existing cardiovascular disease in a single meal. For people managing diabetes with elevated triglycerides, which describes the majority of people with poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, this omega-3 concentration is clinically meaningful. The relationship between omega-3 intake and triglyceride reduction is one of the most robust and consistently replicated findings in nutritional cardiology. Mackerel consumed 2 to 3 times per week provides omega-3 levels associated with 20 to 30% reductions in triglycerides in people with elevated baseline levels. Mackerel also provides 80% of daily selenium requirements per serving, contributing to the glycemic regulation benefits described in the trout section above. The critical distinction for mackerel is variety. Atlantic mackerel and Pacific mackerel, the varieties most commonly available fresh and canned, have low mercury levels and are safe for frequent consumption. King mackerel contains mercury levels high enough that regular consumption creates neurological risk, particularly problematic for people with diabetes who are already managing neuropathy risk. Always verify that mackerel labeled generically is not king mackerel. When purchasing canned mackerel, choose low-sodium varieties and those packed in water or olive oil rather than vegetable oils. William was 68 and had elevated triglycerides at 260 despite taking a statin. He had never eaten mackerel. I asked him to replace one weekly chicken dinner with mackerel for 3 months. His triglycerides at his next laboratory review had dropped to 198. His physician was surprised enough to ask specifically what dietary change he had made. "I told him I had started eating mackerel once a week," William said. "He told me to keep doing it." Fish number 3, sardines. Sardines occupy number 3 because they combine an extraordinary omega-3 concentration with the single most favorable mercury safety profile of any fish on this list, making them the only fish here that can and should be eaten at maximum frequency without any mercury accumulation concern. A 100-gram serving of sardines provides 25 grams of protein and 2 grams of EPA and DHA. This omega-3 content is comparable to salmon, but sardines achieve it at the lowest point in the marine food chain, which means virtually no mercury accumulation. Sardines feed on plankton rather than other fish, so they do not accumulate the heavy metals that concentrate as they move up the food chain through biomagnification. For people managing diabetes, this combination of high omega-3 content and negligible mercury means sardines can be consumed 4 or more times per week without the mercury limitation concerns that apply to larger fish. The cumulative omega-3 benefit of frequent sardine consumption is exceptional. Beyond omega-3, sardines contain a nutrient combination that is uniquely relevant to diabetes management. They provide 35% of daily calcium requirements per serving, which is unusual for a non-dairy food. Calcium plays a role in insulin secretion from pancreatic beta cells, and adequate calcium status has been associated with improved insulin function. They provide 100% of daily vitamin D requirements, addressing the deficiency that is disproportionately common in people with type 2 diabetes. And they contain coenzyme Q10, a compound found in the mitochondria of all cells that supports cardiac muscle function and has been studied for its neuroprotective properties in diabetic neuropathy. The practical advantage of sardines is availability and convenience. Canned sardines in water or olive oil are one of the most affordable high-quality protein sources available and require no preparation beyond opening the can. For people who find the flavor of sardines strong, mixing canned sardines with mashed avocado and lemon juice on whole grain bread creates a combination that is excellent for blood sugar, extremely convenient, and palatably mild. The sodium consideration applies here as well. Choose sardines packed in water with no added salt, or sardines in olive oil with verified low sodium content. Sardines in tomato sauce are a reasonable option because lycopene from the tomatoes has anti-inflammatory properties that complement the sardines' omega-3 content. Dorothy was 64 and resistant to the idea of sardines entirely, describing them as the food she had avoided her entire adult life. I asked her to try the avocado sardine preparation once before dismissing them. She reported back 2 weeks later that she was eating them 3 times per week. Her post-meal glucose readings had improved measurably. "I cannot believe I avoided these for 40 years, she said. "They are nothing like I remembered." Fish number 2, tuna. Tuna reaches number 2 for its combination of exceptional protein content, meaningful omega-3 levels, and extraordinary B12 and selenium concentrations that address specific nutritional deficits common in people managing type 2 diabetes. A 100-gram serving of tuna provides 25 grams of protein, one of the highest protein concentrations of any fish. This protein level is particularly beneficial for post-meal glucose management because high protein intake at a meal significantly slows gastric emptying and the resulting rate of carbohydrate absorption. People who pair tuna with a moderate carbohydrate source consistently show lower 2-hour post-meal glucose readings than the same carbohydrate source eaten with lower protein accompaniments. Tuna provides 200% of daily vitamin B12 requirements in a single serving and 70% of daily selenium requirements. Both nutrients address the specific nutritional vulnerabilities associated with long-term metformin use and with the systemic effects of chronic hyperglycemia on nervous tissue. The mercury consideration for tuna requires the same distinction applied to mackerel. Light tuna, typically skipjack, contains significantly lower mercury levels than albacore or big-eye tuna and is safe for consumption 2 to 3 times per week. Albacore tuna contains mercury levels high enough that consumption should be limited to once per week. Big-eye tuna, commonly served as sashimi or sushi, should be limited to occasional consumption. Canned tuna in water is the most accessible form and provides essentially the same nutritional benefit as fresh tuna at a fraction of the cost. The critical label check is oil versus water packing and sodium content. Tuna in vegetable oil adds omega-6 fatty acids that partially offset the anti-inflammatory benefit of the fish's own omega-3 content. Tuna in spring water with low or no added sodium is the correct choice. For people who find canned tuna convenient but monotonous, tuna combined with chopped cucumber, red onion, olive oil, and lemon on whole grain crackers provides a complete meal with minimal preparation, excellent post-meal glucose stability, and a full spectrum of the micronutrients discussed above. Fish number 1, salmon. Salmon stands at the top of this list because it combines the highest overall EPA and DHA concentration with the most comprehensive micronutrient profile and the most extensive published research base of any fish relevant to diabetes management. A 100-gram serving of wild-caught salmon provides 22 grams of protein and between 2.3 and 2.6 grams of EPA and DHA combined. This omega-3 concentration is sufficient on its own to produce measurable reductions in triglycerides, inflammatory markers, and insulin resistance with twice-weekly consumption. It represents more EPA and DHA than most people consume in an entire week from all other dietary sources combined. But the omega-3 content is only part of what makes salmon exceptional for diabetes. A single serving provides 90% of daily vitamin D requirements, directly addressing one of the most prevalent and consequential nutritional deficiencies in people with type 2 diabetes. It provides 50% of daily vitamin B12 requirements, supporting both nerve health and addressing the depletion associated with metformin. It provides 75% of daily selenium requirements. The combination of these compounds produces effects that are synergistic rather than simply additive. EPA and DHA reduce systemic inflammation and improve insulin receptor sensitivity. Vitamin D enhances insulin secretion from beta cells and improves peripheral insulin sensitivity. B12 supports the myelin integrity of peripheral nerves that is being damaged by chronic hyperglycemia. Selenium activates antioxidant enzymes that protect cells, including beta cells, from oxidative damage. Consumed together in a single serving of salmon twice per week, these compounds address the primary mechanisms driving diabetes complications from multiple directions simultaneously. The wild versus farmed distinction matters more for salmon than for any other fish on this list. Wild-caught salmon, particularly from Pacific sources including Alaskan and Pacific Northwest fisheries, has EPA and DHA concentrations significantly higher than farmed Atlantic salmon. This is because wild salmon eat the krill and smaller fish that produce omega-3, while farmed salmon are often fed grain-based feeds that reduce their omega-3 content. If wild-caught fresh salmon is not accessible or affordable, wild-caught frozen salmon provides identical nutritional value. Farmed salmon from verified responsible aquaculture sources is an acceptable alternative, but verify the omega-3 content on the label if possible. The preparation method for salmon is the most forgiving of any fish on this list. Baking at 180 degrees Celsius with olive oil, lemon, and fresh herbs preserves the full omega-3 and micronutrient content. Grilling produces an excellent result and a flavor that makes salmon consistently one of the most enjoyable ways to eat fish. Adding salmon to a salad with avocado, mixed greens, and an olive oil and lemon dressing creates a meal that is anti-inflammatory at every component level, producing minimal post-meal glucose elevation and maximum cardiovascular protection. George was 66 and had been told by his cardiologist that if his triglycerides did not improve significantly within 6 months, he would require a higher statin dose and potentially additional cardiac medication. His triglycerides were at 295. He began eating salmon twice per week and sardines once per week. 6 months later, his triglycerides had dropped to 188. His cardiologist did not increase his medication. The numbers changed enough that my doctor asked what I had done differently, George told me. I told him I had started eating salmon and sardines. He said whatever I was doing, to keep doing it. Your practical guide to eating these fish. The most common reason people do not achieve the results these fish can produce is inconsistency. 2 to 3 servings per week is the frequency that matches the research. One serving occasionally does not accumulate sufficient EPA and DHA in tissue membranes to produce measurable anti-inflammatory and insulin-sensitizing effects. A rotation that works well for most patients is salmon once per week, sardines once or twice per week, and a third fish from this list according to personal preference. This rotation provides the highest consistent omega-3 intake with the lowest mercury exposure of any 3 fish combination on this list. It also provides variety in flavor and preparation, which supports the consistency that is ultimately the variable determining whether these fish produce their documented results in your specific situation. The practical strategy that works best for most patients is to plan 2 to 3 fish meals per week as a fixed element of the weekly meal rotation rather than deciding day by day. Choose 1 or 2 fish from this list that you genuinely enjoy eating. Prepare them in the ways described. Make this a consistent habit for 8 to 12 weeks before evaluating the results. Track 3 numbers over that period. Your post-meal glucose reading 2 hours after fish-based meals compared to your post-meal readings after comparable meals built around chicken or other proteins, your fasting glucose over time, and if you have laboratory access, your triglycerides at your next blood draw. These 3 markers will show you quantitatively what Fernando and the other patients in this video experienced, that the right fish, eaten at the right frequency, produces measurable metabolic improvements that other dietary changes frequently fail to achieve. Leave a comment telling me which of these 6 fish you are going to add to your weekly diet first, and whether you have previously eaten any of them regularly. Your comment helps other people in this community understand which fish are most accessible and how others are incorporating them. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone managing diabetes who has been focusing exclusively on what not to eat and has not heard about the specific fish that actively support their metabolic health. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.